Okay. So we finished paragraph 26 last time.
Hmm.
And so this time we're gonna do 27. I imagine we'll do like 27 to 29, maybe a bit more. Um, so right, 27 is about him, still more about commentary on theurgic texts. And then 28, 29 is about doing theurgic activities. And then starting at 30, he starts talking about how he benefited from the love of the gods a lot. And so, and how the gods loved him.
And which means, my
And
second,
yeah,
not this one. Yeah.
so the he's doing, I understand this as he's doing like a step, he's going
Hmm.
from what's less valuable to what's more valuable. So commenting on like Orphic and Chaldean texts, that's still very much very like contemplative virtue, right? And so you're not really doing because you're just talking about theurgy, you're not doing theurgy. So you're not actually, doing things that somehow participate in the divine governance of the world. And then there's these chapters, a couple of chapters, right? 28, 29, where he says, he actually did stuff. He actually healed people and um and other things. He caused rain and this stuff. And there's important stuff there about his soul that we'll get to. And then, but the whole point of these of prayers and rituals is that it's not the person who's acting, it's the gods, right? That they take the initiative. And so I think that what's more valuable even than doing these theurgic actions is actually being loved by the gods. The Marinus shows that he's loved by the gods because his prayers are answered or because they appear to him and he has visions of them and things like that. But I think the point is more like a causal one that they were that's um that they wanted to do the good things through Proclus. Um but but let's go. Let's start with 27.
Hmm. Okay. When I was reading,
Hmm.
okay, when I was reading the works of Orpheus in his presence, and hearing in his exegesis not only the thoughts of Iamblichus and Cyrianus, but at the same time many others more germane to theology, more than these Iamblichus and Cyrianus. That's Cyrianus.
Right.
Who was that?
Yeah. I guess no, I think it's so it's unclear, but I think he could be mentioning, that Proclus had more germane thoughts.
Mm.
Um so he right. It's not it's not other people. It's not other people besides Iamblichus and Syrianus, but other things that he said that were more, more germane here, that were better fitting to the text. Right. Idea.
Hmm. Okay. Um, I beg the philosopher not to leave such inspired poetry uninterpreted, but to write a more perfect commentary on this also. His reply was that he had often been eager to write, but had been categorically forbidden by certain visions. For he said that he had seen his own master restraining him with threats. So he had a vision or in real life?
Yeah, he had a vision or maybe a dream where he saw Syrianus saying, "You do not comment on Orpheus, otherwise, bad things would happen."
Mm,
So although he sees, Syrianus, um, that's interesting. He says, his own master is, typically Syrianus, but when we think about a divine agency forbidding someone, we think of Socrates' daimon, right? And I wonder if his own master here could be, and of course, Proclus has this thing that the philosopher is to the student as the daimon is to the soul. So it makes, so is he talking about Syrianus here? Is he talking about his daimon? Maybe it's ambiguous. And and so he was forbidden to write. We're not exactly told why he was forbidden to write another commentary.
Hmm.
But I mean, this exemplifies the idea that, the listening to your daimon and listening to visions is part of being a good person. And um, there's in the Parmenides commentary, he talks about how um, the student should never imitate their master because they don't want to steal the master's glory or something. So the master's honor. And so the student always tries to say what the master said in a new way, in a different way, like the same thing in a different way. And so his example there is he's talking about Parmenides and Zeno, right? So Marinus gave the poem, and it was like, as it were, a positive argument for what being is like. And then Zeno gave these reductio ad absurdum of the opposite position. But he was still defending the same thing. I don't
Hmm.
know if that's behind this. Like, just don't don't keep doing what Syrianus already did. Do your own thing. Like a
Hmm.
part of it. But
So,
Marinus is gonna
oh,
say
I would
you.
have thought that somehow these are supposed to be like secrets or,
Well, no. If you continue reading,
but then
Marinus
he
doc.
reveals it. So yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
Meditating another stratagem, therefore, I besought him to make a note of what he commended in his master's books, meaning which parts he agrees with.
Um. mm, Right. I mean, I would think that was like a note of what he commended in his master's books. Y- Yeah, I would think that he was just commenting on it. Let me uh check here. Um, uh, right. Actually, oh, no, I think I think it's just his. Oh, the English is taking it differently. So here is, I besought him to make a note of what he commended in his master's books. So no, is he a note of his opinions in the margins of his master's books, right? So to write
Hmm.
marginalia in the books. And we know that this actually happened, not just because Marinus says it did, but the Suida, so this later source, this later catalog, says that there's a work about Orpheus with the same title that's attributed both to Syrianus and to Proclus. It's because it's the
Hmm.
same book, just with Proclus's annotation.
Okay. So that was just good nature that he complied. When he had made his notes on the margin of the commentaries, we made a single collation of them all, meaning of his notes. And the result was that there were many lines of notes and comments by him on Orpheus, even in the event he did not do so, even if in the event he did not do this on the whole of the divine myth or on all of the rhapsodies.
Right. So even it's not a complete um, commentary. There are notes about
Hmm.
this. There's also this also reminds me again of the Parmenides commentary because in the Parmenides there's a lot of like getting Parmenides to develop things, right? Like this also happens like in the Republic and so on. Like interlocutors in Plato's dialogues, like people who teach or have the theories, they need to be prodded in order to talk. They need to be uh, to can you hear?
Yeah, yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Um, they need to, like, the other characters have to insist, no, tell us, come on, say things. And Proclus interprets this as how secondary causes, bring out uh, primary causes to act and produce. And we have here that again uh, this image where Marinus has to actively get Proclus to produce his notes, right? And it's interesting here that the notes don't come out as another commentary, but then as you know comments on Syrianus's commentary. But again, so this complements the last paragraph because the last paragraph he was talking about what he wrote about the Chaldean oracles, and now he talked about what he wrote about Orpheus. And so the point is that he wrote commentaries on both of the two. And it's interesting that in writing both, there are dreams or visions associated, right? So in the Chaldean one, there was the dream that the number of years he would live was going to be equal to the number of tetrads that he had composed on the oracles. Um, so there's, uh, weird stuff going on with regard to both of these. And
Hmm.
um, and so there's already he didn't mention this, for instance, when he was talking about the writing of the Timaeus commentary, right, which he mentioned. Um, and so there's already, as it were, this makes this theurgic writing, even if it's still writing, and you can say this is just still contemplative philosophy. There's already it's a more already more religious experience um, than doing the philosophy.
Hmm.
Um, right. And if we go back to just when he talked about, so remember that there's a structure here where he first went through him learning about all the virtues, and then he talked about their practice. And so the end of the part about the learning was his study with Syrianus. So that was paragraph 13. And he said there, so in less than 2 whole years, he read with him the entire works of Aristotle, logical, ethical, political, physical, and the science of theology, which transcends these. So the whole of, contemplative philosophy. Once he had received sufficient direction in these as in a preliminary and lesser mysteries, Syrianus directed him to the mystagogy of Plato in due sequence, and not, as the oracle says, putting his foot across the threshold, and caused him to behold the truly divine rites in Plato's work with the unclouded eyes of the soul and the spotless vision of the mind. And so here, that's probably in some sense the anticipation of the theurgic virtue, or learning the theurgic virtue.
Hmm.
Um, but or maybe we can, yeah. Maybe there is no, I mean, that's if we want to keep the parallelism. Otherwise, we can say the parallelism breaks because he didn't actually learn it with Syrianus because of the story that Syrianus died too early here. And that's why he talks about
Hmm.
this more contemplative stuff here. So anyway, now let's go to 28, where he's going to talk about not just contemplating, but doing.
Right. Okay. So now, uh, okay. It seems like he got around the um his teacher forbidding him to write the commentary somehow,
Right, by
and that's like
writing
a
the,
good thing.
yeah, yeah. No,
Like
that's like a good,
you're supposed to get around these problems.
yeah.
Mm.
And also there's the English translator here, he's been a bit he softened the thing what Marinus says a bit. He says here, such was his good nature that he compiled. But in in the Greek, it's uh mm, it says that he was agotho edestatu. So he was he had it's a superlative of agathoi des. So he had in the highest degree the form of the good, right? And Agathoides is coined like Helioides in the Republic, sun-like, right? So about how the eye is the most is the most sun-like thing of all, and so he's saying that he is most like the good of all, and so there could be something like that here about how him somehow overcoming this injunction makes it is something that he does insofar as he's divine, as far as he's like the good, right?
Hmm.
As such was his good nature is a bit like soft.
Interesting. Okay. Um, in other words, because he wants to teach or something.
Yeah, because he wants to teach, because he's generous, right? He doesn't want to hold the things for himself, because the good is by nature generous. Mhm. Um, okay, so now you're muted. Now it does. Okay, you're back.
I don't know. Okay. Now, as I have said, the result of his instruction in such matters was that he attained theurgic virtue in higher and more perfect degree. Consequently, he did not live according to only one of the modes that characterize divinity. Oh, that of pure thought and aspiration to the better. Okay, that's one part of divinity. But he also displayed a more divine consideration of things in the a more again. But he also but he also displayed a more divine consideration of things in the second rank, not merely in the political way recorded earlier.
Okay, so this is a key thing. So, um, this is about how he didn't just contemplate, but that he also aided other people. So, consideration translates here chronoia, which means, it means providence. And but it also means to do good to someone else, right? And I mean that's one of the reasons it means providence, right? You provide for someone, so take care. And he'd already called his use of the political virtues this in chapter 18. And if you'll recall, there's like this issue in Platonism and Plato in the Republic about how do you reconcile contemplating and being political, because you can go out of the cave and contemplate the forms, but when you get back, people kill you. And um and he's saying, well, the gods by nature, they have both lives, right? They both contemplate and they exercise providence, right? And Proclus says this quite specifically in about, for instance, the the cosmic gods, right? Because so the planets and the stars, by moving around, in those perfect circles, you know, they're just expressing this life where they're constantly contemplating the forms, one form after another. However, their emotions also have all these astrological effects down here. And so they're also exercising providence. They're also taking care of things down here. And that's also the reason why the soul comes down, right? The soul is up there contemplating the forms with the gods, right? Probably in a derivative way. The gods contemplate the forms, and then the daimones of the gods are illuminated by those gods, and the daimones illuminate the souls. It's like a whole divine school up there. And however, the soul says, I don't want to just contemplate, I want to do both things that the gods do. And so I'm going to come down here and act like in the appropriate astrological way. So a soul from Mars, after learning what it can about the forms with Mars, it says, I want to lead a martial life, and it comes down here. And as we've talked about this a couple of times, you can make the wrong choice. Right? You can make many wrong choices. Um, and Um, and so that's also the motivation for you not only to stay with philosophy and studying theology, but also to do theurgy, to engage in prayer and ritual. Um, and so that of pure thought and aspiration to the better. So that's of course that's thought here is noesis, and aspiration to the better is of course orienting himself to the higher causes. So we saw that this is what in what sense there's a contemplative justice. It's because the rational soul is doing what's proper to it in the sense that it's just having these rational insights, these discoveries, and also it is orienting itself towards the daimones and the gods that are superior to it, to Nous and God, as he puts it. And so here, the more divine thing, however, is not just to turn yourself up to the higher things, but also to take care of the lower things, right? And so this is a way in which, it's not enough just to contemplate, but there are higher virtues than the contemplative ones. The but this is a more divine way of doing this than politics. Because indeed, if you're there at the assembly arguing, doing politics, trying to convince people to do the right thing, making concessions when you need to, that is time that you're not spent studying, right? And that is time that you're not really thinking about eternal things and about the gods. The point here about the prayers and ritual is that you help other people, but you're still focused on the gods, right? And so it's a better way, and you can do both at the same time. Whereas the political way, you might be choosing between one and will have to choose between one thing and another. Um, right.
Is there, did we discuss this problem?
I mean,
Is
I might have
there,
mentioned it, but we didn't discuss it
yeah,
at length. All right.
as in, is there, um, I mean, this would be, try to formulate the question. So if all, if all activity is ultimately the God's activities, then
Mhm.
doing regular politics with political virtues would also be acting with the gods, right?
Sure.
And
Sure. Okay.
and that seems to also work. I mean, at least nobody doubts that it works. Uh,
Oh,
and then and then you say, well, if you're doing it that way, it's still only political virtue. If you're doing a what do we call it, theurgy or whichever prayers and other things, um, then in some sense it's a political virtue, or maybe it's not only a political virtue, but for the same reason, all political virtue is not only political virtue, because something like the gods have providence, and being like God will also mean having providence of lower things. And and then so basically I'm asking why would it be more divine to sort of do politics by prayer?
well, because the gods are both, right? The gods are both, let's say, the gods are both kings and they're philosophers. And so if you're just doing politics, yeah, you are doing something divine. That's also why political virtue is a virtue. All virtue is becoming like God. Um, but there's one important part of political virtue, which is of divinity, which is lacking in political virtue, which is being separate from the world. And by philosophy, by purification and contemplation, so by doing like mathematics and philosophy, we separate ourselves from the world. And it's more divine to care for things being separate from them than being mixed up with them. That's
Okay. So to
uh,
speak, um, to be a god is to uh, both be a philosopher and a king at the same time,
yeah.
or
And
even
to
in the
be a
same
philosopher,
act.
exactly. One way of also thinking about this is that if you are a politician, you're going to be a politician in your city, or maybe, in a bigger political unit, but you're going to be a politician locally and among human beings. Whereas if you say do prayer and do ritual, you are also acting politically, but you're acting politically in the world. You're a cosmopolitician. That's that's a different way of thinking about it.
So now I have a different question. So it would seem that prayer, like to the extent that using prayer as like a word for any kind of divine activity or human contemplation of the divine, which is focused or has its end, to achieve something down here, so to speak, then it seems like that would be focused on whatever, on the immanent aspect or on the providential aspect of the God. And since our problem is that we can't do both at the same time, um, then it seems like as insofar as you're focusing on the God's providence, you're not focusing on the God's transcendence. Although for the God, it might be the same thing. It's not the same. It's not clear that it's even the same. Maybe it's even the same for your contemplation, but it's not the same for your prayer because you have to be praying to the whoever is providential, not to whoever is transcendent, even if for the one it's the same. So it seems like
Right,
prayer would still be a lower thing than contemplation, so to speak.
right. I mean, if you think about like, so Proclus has hymns, and they have a structure which is like, many other prayers, where you first describe the god, you say how great they are, and you talk about them, and then later you ask them for something, right? And you can say, well, you see, there's that. On the one hand, you can say, well, that shows that they're separate in the prayer because you're not contemplating the god and asking at the same time. On the other hand, you could also say, it's all one activity. They're together. Because it's all in one prayer. Um, yeah, I I mean that could also that I'm I'm not really sure how to answer this because you might want to say, yeah, it's how do you say this? Yeah, it's just our deficiency, and so this is showing that it's not us who act, it's the gods who act because they can really join the two things. Um, but I'm not really sure that if you're just, turning towards the gods, if that's not going to have some, like, if some consequences down here, because by turning towards them, by adoring them and doing rituals for them, make them present here, and automatically there are there are effects just because they've um, made themselves present. Or you can also say, well, actually asking things is contemplating them as causes and as separate causes, because you're not commanding them. You If you ask for something, you recognize that who you're asking from has a certain transcendence and separation, and and therefore it's in a sense higher um than just contemplating them in their separation and how great they are, because that it includes both aspects. Right. Maybe that's a third way of going about it. Um, I think, yeah, not sure those satisfy.
Hmm. Like I can
And
imagine someone for sure saying that even if you pray, and even if you pray correctly, philosophy or contemplation is a higher thing than that.
hmm, right. And I guess yeah, I don't know, yeah, it seems that Proclus doesn't see it that way. He thinks that. So why does he not? Well, we're going to talk a bit about, like, he's going to give a huge list of things that Proclus did. And we'll see that some of this stuff is like really down to earth, like
Hmm.
for, causing rain and healing people. Some stuff is insights, epiphanies that um, uh, Proclus had about his own soul. So it's not just about like terrestrial things. It's about like knowing yourself. Um, and some of the stuff is being tied to the um, like having uh, uh, divine presence and joining yourself to the gods somehow. And so that's like seems to be something purely contemplative. The point is just to, you're not trying to get anything. You're just trying to be present to the God present to you. So that all seems to be included in this. And so that's one thing. There seem to be some purely contemplative things here. Another
Hmm.
thing is to insist, like, well, maybe the people who say, contemplation is better than prayer, even if it's, say, successful prayer or well done prayer. There are different models about what it means to be a god here behind it. So, um, uh, there's the Proclus thinks that what is most characteristic about the gods is that they are one and they are good, right? Either each of them is a unity, each of them is a value. And actually, when he talks about them doing pronoia, right, he's not so much talking about, I mean, he thinks about, yeah, pronoia means doing good things. However, since they're the primary goods, well, the good things that they do is that they give goodness to other things. Not that they make the situation of other things better, but that they establish that, this is good and this is bad and things like that. And they somehow establish this, I think, well, so okay, I'll continue this line of thought. One way of establishing this stuff concretely is by making wonderful things, right? When you do a wonder, like causing rain to fall when it shouldn't happen, or other, striking supernatural events, you make something special. You make something, this is more important than other things, right? Things like that. And so participating by and the point about and these wonderful things are the beginning of philosophy, right? Philosophy begins in wonder, begins in these things that we can't understand. And furthermore, when you establish what's you like, sacred or good, that's what you use to then know other things. Because to know what a thing is, you need to know what it's good for, and ultimately you need the things that are absolutely good. Right? And so by participating in ritual and prayer, and if this means participating in wonder working, you're not just helping other people, you're also instituting these sacred events and things that then are the basis for understanding the world, and therefore the basis for contemplation. And and in general, and so like that's one extreme way, but if you just think about doing good to others, well, pronoia is supposed to be more proper to the gods than contemplation. Pronoia comes before nous in Proclus, and he interprets pro noia, right? It's prior to nous. And so maybe there's a disagreement with the people who think that contemplation is the highest thing, because maybe they think that contemplation is also the most important thing that the gods do.
Like
Um,
Aristotle thinks for sure.
like Aristotle thinks for sure. Yeah. So Aristotle and Aristotelians might think that. Yeah. Um,
Hmm,
so so
interesting.
that's yeah. Um, so what?
Um,
Why don't you
okay,
read
let me
the?
continue. Um, where am I? Okay. Four, he made use of conjunctions. I'm not sure what that is. Um, and supplications of the Chaldeans, together with their divine and affable revolutions. What are those things?
The conjunctions are the like summoning of the gods or being together with the gods, right? Systasis. And the supplications are, yeah, prayers of intercession, asking things. They're divine and ineffable revolutions. So these are objects that they had that you spun around. They might be the same thing as the yunks that's mentioned later. And if that's correct, then it's like a button spinner, like in that class I taught, that spins. I'm not sure if you saw that.
No.
Oh, no, of course I did that in Portuguese, but um,
Oh, okay.
let me get it here. It's something like this. Nowadays it's a toy,
Hmm,
but it's this thing that
I
you
see.
spin and then you pull and then it spins on its own. Yeah.
Right.
So this was used, I mean, nowadays it's a toy, but it was used ritually by the Chaldeans. We have archaeologists have found examples of this, and
Hmm,
and so that might be their divine and ethical revolutions. If it's not the button spinner, because this is what's called a yunks that he'll be mentioning later, there might be a separate uh, also spinning thing. Okay,
interesting.
yeah.
Okay. And these he acquired for himself and from Asclepigia,
Sclepigeneia.
okay, the daughter of Plutarch. He learned the invocations and the rest of the apparatus. Like there's some things they have to say when you're doing these.
Right, say and do while you're doing these things. Yeah. Um, yeah, the rest of the apparatus here is the ten anses the rest of the other practices. So the invocations here are possibly like these names and words that don't mean anything that we find in the Greek magical papyri, like phoneses. Um, so yeah, and this is Plutarch, the one he studied under when he arrived in Athens.
Mhm. For she alone, this daughter, preserved the rituals and the whole process of theurgy handed on to her from the great Nestorius by her father.
Right. So here is so yeah, Nestorius was the father of Plutarch, who was the father of Asclepigeneia, and so that seems that there's like this tradition within this family of teaching things, of handing down these theurgic techniques. It seems also interesting that she teaches Proclus this, right? But we see here that it was handed down in the family, so that might be a reason to think that she didn't have children, right?
Hmm.
Um, and but yeah, see, Proclus mentions this Nestorius in a discussion of astrology in the Republic commentary, where he said that Nestorius handed down a technique for discovering the name of the daimon on the basis of the birth chart, but he doesn't give us the details. Okay. Um, do
Okay,
you continue?
four. But before these, the philosopher was purified in due order by the Chaldean purifications and experienced the fiery apparitions of Hecate with his own eyes, as he himself records in his own writings.
Right. We don't really have this, but the Chaldean oracles, I think I brought this text when we were reading about Proteus. So remember in the Odyssey, um, Odysseus, he and his colleagues, they trap Proteus to get knowledge from him, and Proteus keeps changing shape. And Proclus explains this well. This is because the gods, they have all these different powers, but since we are in time, we perceive these powers one after another. And he gives an example that says, this is also spoken of in the oracles by how the gods appear. And there's one specific oracle that says about how like that Hecate can appear as a ball of fire and a horse and a young boy and this and that. And so it's probably something like that. It's literally a vision of the goddess in as a shape made of fire. Um, so you see, this is stuff that, it's not necessarily just pronoia
Hmm.
for the sake of helping other people, but it is pronoia in the sense of generating these miraculous things that then are, the basis for an understanding the world. It's the pronoia.
Hmm. He actually caused rains by an apposite use of a eunuchs or eunuchs,
Yeah. Uh,
releasing Attica from a baneful drought.
right. Apposite as an appropriate called for. Um, yeah. So he
Okay.
also, brought rain when it was dry.
He also laid down defenses against earthquakes and tested the power of the prophetic tripod. Those are two different things.
Yes.
I guess an
Laid
earthquake
down
didn't
defense.
happen, but that's like,
Yeah. So laid
um,
down a defense against earthquakes. So that is that he made or he had actually like talismans against earthquakes. Um, and then he tested the power of the prophetic tripod. And then I'll read the end of the sentence because there's a translation issue. And produced verses on its decline. Not really clear why he thought it was about, why the translator thinks it's about its decline. He doesn't mention that the Greek is weird or anything. And here in the critical edition, there's nothing about that. The text actually says, "Peri testu tes autu lexeos, stichus ex elaben." So about his own lot, right? So he produced verses when he was using the prophetic tripod
Mm-hmm.
about himself and and what order of the world he belonged to, or just about what was allotted to him and what was his fate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, two things: the power of the prophetic tripod. How do you use the how do you use a tripod? You sit on it. Um, it can be a very tall tripod. That might be part of why it's supposed to help you to have visions or something. It like disconnects you from the earth. But there's a long tradition of the oracle sitting on the tripod, but typically you yourself wouldn't sit on the tripod. You'd go to the oracle sitting on the tripod. And here, I guess, if he tested the power of the prophetic tripod and he himself produced the verses, then he sat on it himself. We don't know more about how the tripod was used. But what is
Mm-hmm.
interesting, he's going to tell us the verses soon, and is that he's not using this to tell the future, just about like what's going to happen to me and things like that. Right? Again, it's contemplative in a broader sense, right? And also, it's um, uh, it's uh, it's divination in a different sense, not just knowing the future, but having access to divine knowledge. Right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, 4. When he was in his 40th year, he seemed in a dream. So that's the same as the tripod. Did it cause you to
I
dream
think
or
I think so because it says four,
he
and
seemed mm,
yeah. So and I don't think it's he seemed to be in a dream. I think he dreamt. So yeah, that might give us a clue. Somehow he dreamed. Like if you use the tripod, you dream later and you have prophetic dreams.
mhm. Okay. He seemed in a dream to utter the following words. There hovers the super celestial and immortal radiance, leaping forth from the roaring fire that congregates at the source.
Okay. So what is this? Why is Marinus telling us this? Um, they there hovers the super celestial and immortal radiance. Um, yeah, maybe not but right? There flies um there flies above the heavens an immortal radiance, and then leaping forth from the roaring fire that congregates at the source. So it can also mean like coming forth from the roaring and fiery band or congregation or fontal congregation. So what is he talking about here? If he's talking about his own allotment, it seems that the it's about beyond the heavens. Beyond the heavens has two meanings in Proclus because he has an ambiguous interpretation of the Phaedrus myth. So the Phaedrus myth is mentioned in Platonic Theology, Book 4 and Book 6. And in Book 4, he talks about the super celestial place and how that is where the primary symbols of the gods appear, and that's his account of like how you can have uh, divine visions and things like that. In Platonic Theology Book 6, he talks about the gods of the Phaedrus. And we talked about these gods last class because they're the hypercosmic gods, right? They sustain the possible lives. And if he's talking about his own belonging, it seems that I think he's probably talking about that, right? And so, what is this immortal light? So, that might be something like the root of his soul up there, right? Amongst those hypercosmic souls. And then he's talking about that, and about how it leaps from this frontal and fiery, roaring, fiery band of or group. So it might be something like that the root of his soul and the life belongs to, for instance, the supercelestial sun, something like that. Because the sun, there is a supercelestial sun that Proclus talks about in Platonic Theology Book 6. And that seems to be, and it's called fontal, and that might be something like that. And this idea of the band, the Theasa, um, Theaseus, that seems like this group image of a group of souls around a god or something. And the fire, I mean, Chaldeanly everything is fire, and they call everything fire, but that makes me think particularly of the sun. So maybe it's saying something like, I saw that my soul, possibilities of my soul are connected with that of the sun in the sense of producing knowledge. And also in the Platonic Theology Book 6, the the hypercosmic sun has to do with elevating souls, specifically with this function of elevation. So maybe it's something like that. It's interesting because I work all of this out and I extend it to explain that this is hypercosmic because it makes a contrast with the next verses we'll see, which seem to be about its cosmic function. So you can
Mm.
continue reading.
Okay, and at the beginning of his 42nd year, he seemed to utter the following in a loud voice. My soul has come, breathing the might of fire, and opening the mind to the aether in a weird, fiery whirl. It rises and clamors immortally for the starry orbits.
Right. Again, there are translation issues here, and here I think is something that points to what he like something specific about the understanding of the good life here. So, let me get the English again.
Couldn't fire have to do with the Hecate vision? Where there's fire.
It it could be, yeah, I mean, it could have to do with the Hecate vision, but so my soul has come breathing the might of fire. So that has come can also be has arrived, right? So he could be having something like a vision of his soul arriving at its end, so returning to its God or something like that. And opening the mind, so that's the nous, right? To um to the ether in a fiery whirl, right? Um, it rises, right? Pros aethera pursolecius ornutai. So it goes up to the heavens, the ether in a fiery whirl. The Proclus thinks that the heavens are made of fire, right? And they constantly shift. And then in English, and clamors immortally for the starry orbits. I guess you could take it as for, but the a more natural way, which is to take the starry orbits as a direct object of Breme clamors, and then it can be like it plays the orbits, so it makes them move, right? And so this is repeats this idea that the highest life, the life in the heavens, is one where we're not just contemplating, we're causing motion. You rule the world together with the gods. That's the expression, the Phaedrus. And and so this presents again this idea that the highest thing isn't just to contemplate, but rather also to cause, right? And here to cause the motion of the heavens. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
And so that, right, and just
So,
to clarify, the fourth, I mean, the one in the 40th year seems to be about his hypercosmic root, and this vision in the 42nd year seems to be connected with he sees himself returning to his cosmic home. Right.
mhm. Yeah, I'm always like less impressed by these like things because like I don't know, it doesn't seem so hard to write a few lines of poetry or like vague and like
Right.
there has to be like a whole context where it's like somehow very serious because it's a vision or something and I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Like his philosophy seems much better than this.
No, I agree totally that his philosophy seems much better than this. Yes, and I think that's why he's famous as a philosopher and not like as an oracle. Yes.
Okay. Um, in addition to what I have said, it clearly beheld that he was of the Hermetic chain.
Right. I'll explain that. Read the next thing.
Okay, and believe because of a dream that he had the soul of Nicomachus the Pythagorean. Let's see, like
Right.
a reincarnation thing.
Reincarnation thing. And Nicomachus wrote about arithmetic. He was a mathematician. And um, who, which god in the heavens governs calculation and numbers? Well, it's Hermes, Mercury, right? So he's saying that his soul was one that belonged, like its heavenly home was Mercury. So that was and there's the translator here tries to associate it with this use of like the golden chain to talk about the succession of Platonic heads of the Platonic school, but I think this is just uh, this is just him saying, no, I belong to my soul belongs to the planet Mercury, and it's the same soul that came down to um, be with Nicomachus and to give life to Nicomachus. And if we see about like what he says about the Hermetic chain in other places, he says like that discovery, or I'm sorry, investigations, the thesis, comes to the soul through Maya, so Hermes' mother, and but discovery comes through Hermes and the Hermetic chain, and so that it might have something to do again with this theme of Proclus, the father of many doctrines. Proclus, who discovered all these things, who was this guy who kept having these insights.
Hmm.
Um, and also, if we interpret this as he belongs to Mercury, here we have an example of um, probably what so Iamblichus said you can know your daimon, and presumably you can know your god, either through astrology or through theurgy, and it's better to do it through theurgy. And so here's the example of someone finding out through theurgy. Yeah.
Hmm. Is there the whole association of Hermes with like interpretation or like because he's the
Definitely.
messenger and we have the word
Yeah,
hermeneutics, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. That he's an interpreter, that he's a messenger, so that makes sense of Proclus as writing all these commentaries. Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, okay.
yeah, that actually, let me just check something here. Hmm. Ooh, yeah, it's interesting that Proclus. Yeah, I'd have to consider this against because Marinus is the one who tells us about his birth chart, and Mercury isn't that prominent in that. That's an interesting datum. But
Hmm.
anyway, I'll have to think about that.
Okay.
Okay. So that's the first chapter on the cool theurgic things he did, and now there's the second one, which is mainly about him healing Asclepigenia.
Okay, so this is and that's the okay. And all now all these knowledge seem to has also something to do with like self-knowledge, right? Like if you're supposed to know yourself, then there's like knowing yourself as like the knowing that your soul and so on. And then there's also this like how do we call it? Like symbolic or theurgic ways of like knowing who you are. So I am the chain of Hermes, or I am the reincarnation of
Exactly.
Nicomachus or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So they
Okay.
all seem to have.
And if one wished to make a long story, one could say a great deal in relating the theurgic practices of the happy man, but he doesn't want to make a long story. Um, um, but I should recall just the one of a myriad, for it is marvelous even to hear. Once Asclepigenia, the daughter of Archiades and Plutarch, and the wife of Theaginus, our benefactor, whoever that was.
Right.
Um,
Again, yeah. Theaginus is someone who gave money to the academy at some point, and Archidas, not confused with Archidas, who grew up with Proclus and who went into politics. This Archidas is a woman and is married to Plutarch.
hmm,
And um, yeah,
okay.
yeah. So and it's the same as Clipogenia that before was she taught she initiated Proclus to theurgy.
Um, while she was still a maid and being reared by her parents, was gripped by a severe illness which the doctors were unable to cure. Archiades, whose hope of offspring rested entirely on her, was distraught and full of grief, as one would expect. When the doctors gave up, he went, as his custom, to the philosopher who was his final anchor, or rather his benevolent savior, I think, and earnestly begged him to come quickly and make his own prayers on behalf of of the daughter. Taking with him the great Pericles from Lydia, a man who himself was no mean philosopher, Proclus visited the shrine of Asclepius to pray to the god on behalf of the invalid. For at that time, the city still enjoyed the use of this and retained intact the temple of the Savior. So Asclepius was like the doctor god.
Yeah,
And while he was praying in the ancient manner, a sudden change was seen in the maiden and a sudden recovery occurred. For the Savior, being a god, healed her easily. And when the sacred act were done, he went to this Clipogenia and found that she had just been released from the critical sufferings of her body and was in a healthy condition. Such was the act he performed. Okay. And yet, in this, as in every other case, he evaded the notice of the mob, um, meaning Christians, or
it could be Christians. It could just be just the populace. But yeah, most of the
and
population is
offered
Christian.
no pretext to those who wished to plot against him. Does that have to do with like so this was kept in secret or something, or
Yeah, yeah. This is kept in secret, and I think there's also something like uh, I don't know if there's some kind of modesty that if you do something wondrous, you're not supposed to talk about it. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
um, okay. The house in which he dwelt was in this respect of great assistance to him, for in addition to the rest of his good fortune, his dwelling too was extremely congenial to him, being also the one inhabited by his father Syrianus and by Plutarch, his father like his teacher, right? Whom he himself styled his forefather. This was like his teacher's teacher, or also his teacher, but okay.
exactly.
Um, it was a neighbor to the shrine of Asclepius, celebrated by Sophocles, and of that of Dionysius by the theater, seen, or if not, it became visible from the Acropolis of Athena.
Right. So here is this is like important information for us about Proclus's house, right? Because it points that like he lived in where what was the academy, right? And and so it was where Syrianus lived before and then Plutarch lived before. And so the head of the academy always lived on site, and it seems.
Hmm.
And this information about that it's close to all these temples is what allowed the identification of the building when it was dug up. It seems like there are some debates about it, but I don't know. It seems that it could very well be his. It could there's like there's like a room there which would be ideal for teaching classes because it's like it has this semicircular shape. Um, and anyway, so this is and also this gives an example um of what a theurgic activity is, which is healing this girl Asclepiadenia. It's interesting that he's doing this presumably before she, teaches him all the stuff that she does teach him. And um again the work here is called explicitly a marvel, a tauma, right? Near the beginning. And and right, for it is marvelous even to hear, right? And it is truly a wonder. And again, that's wonders that are the beginning of wisdom, and I think that's part of the idea that pronoia produces wondrous things. Um, so that's that's it. Not so much, I mean, besides illustrating what the theurgic life is like, it's not such a philosophically dense chapter.
Hmm.
Now we get into the chapters about how the gods appeared to him and loved him. And so he'll talk about how he's connected to Athena and Asclepius, the god at Adrata. Um, there's other gods that Pan and the mother of the gods. So this goes all the way to 33. Okay.
Okay.
Um, yeah, we can
Now, should
continue
start, I
reading.
guess. Okay,
Yeah.
fairly. How Theurgy himself was to the philosopher goddess is sufficiently established by his choice of the philosophical life, which was much, which was such as my account reveals. But so that's sort of like obvious. But the
Right,
goddess
and
herself, we
we talked about the story about how she appears to him and tells him go to Athens, things like that.
right.
Right.
Um, oh, I stuck on something before. But the goddess herself also indicated plainly when her statue, which was at that time situated in the Parthenon, was displaced by those who move even the immovable.
Right. Christians.
Why do they move the immovable?
Well, I mean it's an expression, and I mean the idea is that you change sacred things, and so you change things that shouldn't be changed. And
Hmm.
um right, so it's emphasizing their sacrilege. Presumably I I think that the idea is that they're taking down the temple or they're making it into a church.
Hmm.
I think there's literature on this. I need to check it again. Yeah.
Okay, four. It seemed to the philosopher in a dream that he was approached by a woman of fear aspect who announced that he must prepare his house as quickly as possible. For the mistress of Athens, she said, desires to live with you.
Right. So, Justin Wilberg in his chapter in All from One discussing Marinus' biography, he he gives an account that at the house of Proclus that was dug up, they found a sacrifice of a full pig. Right, the pig wasn't eaten, and together with seven cups. right? They were all buried together. And the seven is a number that's proper to Athena because she's a virgin and she also is born directly from Zeus. And seven is a prime number in the decad, and it doesn't have a multiple within the decad, right? And so that's the symbol that, she's virgin and she doesn't have children, right? And so that's why seven is associated with her. And Um, and so he has this account about how he can explain this sacrifice, and also in the Orestes, I think, there's a sacrifice of a pig for purposes of purification tied to Athena. And so he says this might have these remains of this pig and these seven cups, they might have been like a response to this, the mistress of Athens desires to live with you dream, right? So you purify your house to receive Athena. And also, like this is more general a symbol of like as Christianity spreads, pagan cult becomes more of a private affair, right? It retreats into the homes of people.
Mhm. Right. Okay. As for his affinity with Asclepius, that was indicated first by the act just mentioned, but we're also persuaded by the epiphany of the god in this final illness. For when he was halfway between sleep and dreaming, he saw a serpent crawling about his head, from which from which moment the illness began to subside, and thus with the epiphany enjoyed some remission of the illness. Indeed, had not his great and eager desire for death prevented it, and had he deigned to give the appropriate care to his body, I believe that perfect health would have returned.
Right.
Hmm.
So that the vision of the serpent coincided with healing, shows that this serpent was specifically Asclepius, because serpents can be associated with a bunch of different deities. And and this is again, he's Marinus is emphasizing this desire for death that's there from when he arrives in Athens, right? And Plutarch is concerned about his diet. And if he had, taken care of his body better instead of being so strict and ascetic, he probably would have survived it. Um, and so again, this is, he's not like a model human being, he's a model philosopher, which is like a model star, right? So that's part of
Hmm.
it. There's something else that's interesting here, which is just the fact that he has these close personal relationships with many different gods, right? So even if, we saw that he belongs specifically to the Hermaic chain, it's not like that he just has a relationship with Hermes. He has a relationship with many gods.
Okay. And is that like a normal thing, or is that?
I think that's a normal thing, but I think that's I think that's a normal thing. So you don't just worship one god or not even like the god you belong to, but it's worth noticing just because this is an illustration of that.
Mhm. Okay. Um, Never mind. Yeah. 31. And when he recalled these memorable events, it was not without sympathetic tears. For he feared, as his age increased, that the arthritic illness of his father, which for the most part is apt and likely to pass from children to children from their fathers, should in this way come to him also. And his fears were not, I think, in vain. For even before this, as he had to recount above, he was conscious of an ailment of this kind, on which occasion, indeed, another wonderful thing happened to him. For on the advice of certain people, he applied to his ailing foot the so-called liniment. And as he was lying on his bed, a bird swooped down suddenly and snatched away the liniment. This was therefore a divine symbol, and truly Paeonian, sufficient to give him confidence in the future.
Ionian, so to do with healing.
What's the story of the bird? I don't know.
Right. So
Um,
the idea is like he applied this, he was concerned about being about, oh, I'm going to suffer from my foot because, I'm going to suffer arthritis. It starts with the feet. And my father had it. I'm going to have it. And then some people said, well, if you want to stop that, you need to put this stuff on your foot. And so he put it on his foot. But then a bird came and took it away. And
Mm,
so this is then taken as a sign that you don't need to prepare for the illness. It's going to be fine.
I see. Um, and yet, as I have said, he was nonetheless preoccupied by fear of the illness in a later time. So he supplicated the god about this, entreating him to give him some clear message. And in sleep he saw, for bold thought that is, even to think of this, one must nevertheless be bold to bring the truth to light without shrinking. He saw, as it seemed, someone coming from Epidaurus, and leaning over his
Adaros.
leg, Epidaurus. So humane was he that he did not even refuse to kiss the knees. From this time on, therefore, as he went through the rest of his life, he was confident about this and reached a great old age with no further experience of suffering.
Right. So Epidaurus, there was a major shrine to Asclepius, right?
Mm,
And so humane here is the god, right, that appears to him, or the person that appears to him. And and that he has humane here is philanthropia, so he loves human beings so much that he even kissed Proclus's knees, and then this gave him confidence that really he was not going to suffer from the arthritis that his father had. Um, and so these two symbols, right, like the bird and then later this apparition, are taken to be signs of special love that Asclepius had for him, and um, and yeah, and so this connection with them.
this like whole dramatic thing where he should be bold to say is trying to say something like the god himself came to him.
Right, yeah, and about this entreating him to give and sleep his soul for bold. Yeah, I think it's like yeah, it's um yeah, he's like apologizing for telling this vision. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. This boldness is interesting. It's Tolmeron, so it has to do with yeah, really audacity of uh kind of audacity like of defying gods and things like that. So very, very strong boldness. Um,
Mm.
yes. And I think it might be, I think Marinus might be apologizing for telling a personal memory of Proclus's, right?
Mm.
So he's explaining why he's violating Proclus's privacy.
Interesting.
Um, yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Moreover, 32. Moreover, the god Nadrata clearly revealed his affinity with this man who was dear to the gods. I don't know which
Right.
god.
So he's going to talk uh about this about who it is. That's the whole question in this chapter. Um, so Proclus initially doesn't know who the god is.
Okay. Proclus was in for when Proclus listed his sanctuary and he received them graciously with the manifestations. Proclus was in perplexity, prayed to learn what god or gods frequented the place and were honored there, since different tales prevailed among the locals. Some of mine, so there could be like a temple and nobody knows who which god it's really of the temple is of.
Yeah, yeah. So some people go there to worship someone and someone else. So yeah, that's the thing. Because I'm
Mm,
also like not every god. This is a problem that we have nowadays. It's not always clear from a statue, for instance, which god is depicted, right?
mm,
And some gods aren't even depicted with anthropomorphic statues.
okay. Some find, I guess it's like because it's so old and like nobody remembers who made it or something.
Yeah.
Some find that the temple belonged to Asclepius and had many signs to confirm this. Thus, they said that voices were actually heard somewhere in the place, and that there was a certain table dedicated to the god, that oracles that brought healing were constantly being given, and that those who came there were saved from the greatest jeopardy. But others believed that the Dioscuri frequented the place.
The twins, Castor and Pollux.
Okay.
Right.
Um, for some time ago, certain people had also seen an waking vision, as it seemed to them, two youths on the road to Adrata, extremely fear of aspect, riding horses and saying that they were hurrying to the temple. From their look, they looked them to be men, but they were instantly persuaded that their apparition was of a more demonic kind. For when the men arrived at the sanctuary, they were told, even without asking, that the pair had been seen by the men who waited on the temple, but on the side of the ladder, they suddenly became invisible. Okay. For this reason, then, as has been said, the philosopher was perplexed, unable to disbelieve this story. And as he begged the gods of the place to disclose their identity to him, it seemed to him that the god visited him in a dream and gave him a clear prompting. What is this? Have you not heard Iamblichus saying who the two are, and making hymns to Machion, and Podalirius?
So delirious. Yeah.
And apart from this, the god thought, the happy man, I don't know what this answer says. Who are
So
these?
so
This is
um so these are doctors, and so they're associated with Asclepius. And
Mhm.
so the two men seen riding on horseback are not the Dioscuri.
Oh,
There's
okay.
they belong to Asclepius, so the shrine belongs to Asclepius.
Okay. And apart from this, the god thought the happy man worthy of such grace that he also appeared, and the way that one pronounces them, encomium of someone in the theater, he said in an actor's voice, with his hand extended in a gesture, I should declare the very words of the god. Proclus is the glory of the city. Now, what greater testimony could there be than this that the man who was happy in everything was also dear to the gods?
Right. So that is weird. I mean, to not only that Proclus. So first of all, it seems like this happened in a dream, right? The god visited him in a dream, and the dream, and then he says, and oh, but this is so interesting. The Greek is, I mean, sure, you can say he is the ornament of the city, is the glory of the city, but the Greek is prokos hokosmos tes politeas. He is the cosmos, is the world of the city. That, of course, although in context it means ornament or glory, it's uh, a Neoplatonist couldn't help noticing the word cosmos. Um, and let me see here if um, yeah, he doesn't uh, have anything. The French translators don't have anything specific to say about this. Um, oh, just that someone else has reports having this kind of praise from Asclepius given. Um, so again, this is supposed to be some kind of like divine witness that he's loved by the gods.
Right.
It's
Yet
also,
an account, yeah,
and I mean, it's also interesting here just that this concern that Proclus has to find out who the actual god of the place is. He doesn't just say, "Oh, this temple belongs to both." He actually wants to figure out which one it is. It has to be one or the other, and so he turns to the gods themselves to figure it out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, what created that right? Yet, on account of this great fellow feeling with the divine, he was always moved to tears if he ever told us his memories of the things that he had seen and the divine encomium that had been spoken to him.
Okay. We
Okay.
will be wrapping up, I think, the biography next time. So because we've done 30, or we've come all the
Yeah,
way
this
to
is the end
32.
almost.
Yeah, this is the end almost, and then we'll be getting back to more philosophical texts.
Okay, let's go.
Good.
Um,
Okay, and I'll see you next week, beginning of November.
yeah, I guess. Think so.
Okay, sure, great.
All right.
Have a good
All
one then.
right.
Okay.
Listen.